It's extraordinary.
We wanted independence.
There was no hatred, there was no dispute, and there was no...
No one was really ready for it.
Hindus in India sheltered Muslims, and Muslims in Pakistan sheltered Hindus.
That we in India...
And that was a great reason why this all happened.
From the early 20th century, there were growing calls for Indian independence, the right for India to govern itself. Mahatma Gandhi had been demanding independence for many decades, encouraging his followers to do so through non-violent means. Calls for freedom became louder during the Second World War, when 2.5 million Indian soldiers took part in the war effort, fighting on the side of the British. Mr. Arthur Platt was in the Indian Civil Service.
The idea of giving independence by stages was intended as a recognition of India's contribution. And India made a very big contribution to the Second World War.
Winston Churchill, Britain's wartime leader, had vowed never to preside over the dismantling of the British Empire. But after the war, was a new government led by Labour leader Clement Attlee, which made Indian independence seem more possible. Arthur Platt continues.
In addition, you've got a change of government to the Labour government, and they're much less imperial than before.
Amarjit Kaur was one of many who hoped India would become independent.
We wanted independence. Why should the British think that we in India cannot rule ourselves?
But what would independence look like? And why did partition happen? In the decades leading up to partition, religious identity had become much stronger. Many argue this was stoked by the British policy of divide and rule, the idea that a population could be more easily controlled if they were not able to unite against those governing them. Two visions of an independent India began to emerge. Jawaharlal Nehru, who led the Congress Party, wanted India to be united after the British left, and for it to be a secular, non-religious country. But Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who led the Muslim League, wanted protections, even a separate country for the 100 million Muslims who made up around a quarter of the population of British India. Saeed Sharifuddin Pirzada remembers the fear that some Muslims felt at the time. He says they worried they wouldn't be protected by the Hindu majority once the British left.
As soon as war ended, the British will not be in a position to continue their rule over India. When they leave India, then it will not be an orderly India. It falls in the hands of the Congress, then the Hindus will dominate. They will trample upon the Muslims. So he then said certain territories be given to them, and that is what he called Pakistan.
In 1946, the Great Calcutta killings happened, which left thousands of Muslims and Hindus dead, having turned on each other. Some historians describe this as the first partition massacre. Killings spread across northern India. Some historians say the violence was fueled by concerns about the end of empire and what India would look like once the British left. And some Indians sought to destroy those of the other religion. But how could people who had lived largely peacefully for generations end up like this? Historians still debate it. There were some organised and armed groups who targeted those of the other religion, and in some cases, it was neighbour against neighbour, in some form of self-defense or revenge, but the atmosphere at the time was frenzied. At the start of 1947, the British announced they would be leaving India at the latest by June 1948. Lord Louis Mountbatten became the last Viceroy to India and was tasked with transferring power from British rulers to a new self-ruling government. Discussions took place between him and the main political parties about the future of India once the British departed. While these talks took place, violence mounted across northern India between Hindus and Sikhs on one side, Muslims on the other. Against this backdrop, Mountbatten came to a decision. In a famous radio address on June 3rd, 1947, Lord Mountbatten announced that when the British left India, it would be divided into Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. Lord Mountbatten shocked everyone by announcing Britain's departure date as August the 15th, 1947. That meant India would be divided in less than 10 weeks. Many were taken by surprise that India was to be partitioned. Some may have expected it, but not so soon. Syed Sharifuddin Pirzada was shocked.
And I don't blame the British as such as a whole or as a class. Because if they had taken effective steps in time, much of bloodbath would have been avoided.
Mrs. Hooper was the third generation of her family to live in India.
No one was really ready for it, but it was Jinnah. He was very sure that Pakistan could work overnight. Thousands were killed.
John Lal believed the transfer date of the British leaving India was too soon.
It's often said Mountbatten was to blame for rushing things. I think it probably exacerbated the killings and the disorder, but this was a failure of the British government. They knew what was happening. It's extraordinary for the certainty of widespread disorder and even ethnic cleansing. Killings were staring everyone in the face. Movements of population could have been staggered. Truces could have been arranged. Time could have been given for people to move.
Historians still disagree about why Lord Mountbatten chose to move the transfer date forward, leaving so little time to divide a country as populous and as complex as India.